Hello and welcome to this episode of FireDEV, a fireside chat with people in the industry. Today I have Jasmin Sangha. Jasmin, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm not doing too bad. And how are you enjoying the weather? And how was your weekend?
Weekend was nice. Weather was not so nice. I don't know about you, but we had thunderstorms all of
Same here.
Sunday, and then it was super muggy. So typical British summertime stuff.
Pretty much, yeah. So obviously we got Jasmin on the podcast today. She's part of Allied Global Marketing. She's also a female in the gaming industry. So we'll be diving, into that. But firstly, you work for Allied. What is your role at Allied, and what is Allied in general?
So I'm the UK and EU director of gaming partnerships. So what I fundamentally do is I oversee a team that looks after gaming partnerships. So we sitting across a wider business called Allied Global Marketing. So it's not necessarily a business that the man on the street would have heard of, but basically we are what's known as a full service agency. So we work across strategy, creative solutions, paid media, own media. So we kind of encompass everything. So say if you're Coca-Cola and you need a brand new marketing campaign, you can basically come to Allied and we will do every single part of it. So I'm making sure that we're identifying the right audience, that we're carving out a space for you and your brand new product. We do all the creative ideation, which is like coming up with all these kind of brand new ideas, and then we'll do all the sort of media, basically billboards, digital adverts, all that kind of stuff that will be put into it, as well as loads of social stuff. The part of the business that I look after is what we call partnerships. Now, partnerships is like a super nebulous term, but you almost have to think about it as like a Swiss Army knife. So, using our Coke example again, if you, even if your Coke, a pound will only stretch so far, so you'll only have a certain amount of marketing budget. But what partnership does is it almost creates these co-marketing initiatives between, say, Coke and another brand, where you're able to create this echo chamber, which creates a really, really cool moment. So I specifically do that with gaming. So we have a stable of publishers that we look after that make games and all these sort of amazing titles. So we will go out and find brands to talk to almost kind of create these really cool partnerships. So it can be, in-game cosmetics or in-game events. It can be like promotions. So buy a can of Pringles and get £5 to spend in game or something like that. And it's going to also be just some really cool content, videos, social promotions, competitions. It tends to be a little bit of everything, if I'm honest with you.
Fair enough. So you was talking obviously about some of these partnerships. Can you talk about some of the partnerships that Allied specifically has done, and some of these campaigns that like a campaign, perhaps that everybody will have come across and will think, oh, I remember the campaign, but obviously I don't know that Allied was behind it, for example.
Yeah, so for example, we work with Tencent, which is one of the biggest gaming publishers in the world, and they have a game called PUBG Mobile. So we partnered with a business called Grubhub, which is basically like Just Eat, but out in the States. And what we did was we basically offered people playing PUBG an opportunity to win money off a food order. We had a spot during the Games Awards. So it's kind of almost like you take game A and it's, the audience is, they are on there all the time. They're very engaged with it and all that kind of stuff. So it gives a brand an opportunity to, one, talk to that audience directly, but then also gives the game an opportunity to talk to a brand new audience as well. Another game that we worked on recently is a real-time strategy game called Company of Heroes. So basically it's a game set in World War II. It is on the sort of niche side of things, but actually we have partnered with some really cool brands on that one, and specifically the Imperial War Museum, which is obviously based in London. And actually we're creating a unique content series. So some of these battles that take place in this game, obviously based on, real life history and things that actually happened, there is like tons and tons of story beneath that. So someone like the Imperial War Museum is the right person to go to because they obviously have all this knowledge and expertise, but also there will be the kind of audience that will be interested in history naturally. So again, it's kind of that two-way street thing where it gives people that come, that interact with Imperial War Museum content the chance to discover a brand new game, and then it gives people that play Company of Heroes already, like, additional history, additional story, and kind of links them back to the Imperial History Museum.
Okay. So my next question is, some of the brands you're talking about are big global brands that, in terms of the budget, are the highest, you know, within the industry. Why would they use Alloyed or any middleman effectively like Alloyed instead of doing it internally? Because you mentioned Tencent, a Chinese company I've heard of, and some of the other companies as well. And I know similar campaigns that Allied hasn't necessarily done, but it's effectively the same thing. They've got a middleman, and but they're huge titans in their industry. Why not just do it internally? They got the money.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think it boils down to a couple of things. I think some of it is purely manpower. It's never a case of, no matter what, role I've worked in, you send an email to someone and say, hey, would you really love to do this thing? And they go, yes, great, brilliant, and
It never happens like that.
it literally never happens. You really do have to go around and sort of beat some doors down, and not every conversation that you have turns around immediately. So much of what we do, especially on the gaming side of the business, is education. Gaming, though, has kind of exploded into the mainstream and sort of popular culture over the last couple of years. There are a lot of people that aren't really familiar with it, and more importantly, aren't familiar with the nuances of specific titles, right? Because every title comes with its own kind of fans and its community and things that, certain lexicon and language and way to speak to one another. So our job is to really kind of go out there and educate, those sort of more mainstream brands about what gaming is and actually how to interact with those audiences in a really authentic way. I think so much of what I've seen over the last couple of years, and what I kind of refer to internally as the Fortniteification of everything, is they people will collaborate with a game and they drop a skin in and they think that's a good gaming partnership. And I think maybe 2-3 years ago it was. But for gamers and a gaming audience, they want to do something new and interesting. So much of what we do as well is about creatively brainstorming. So I think, you work, and I've worked with, game studios for a while now, and you have these brand managers, bless them, that are working on a title for maybe 2 to 3 years, and they tend to get very, very siloed in their approach. So what happens is, they just don't have the time and energy to sort of look around market and look what's going on and all this kind of stuff. So not only do not have the manpower to go down and beat the doors, you'll probably head down on like a bunch of, load of pre-order announce and launch stuff already. So by using an agency who are constantly looking around, constantly talking to people, constantly having those sorts of conversations, it's an immediate temperature check as to what's going on. And I think for if you're a publisher, or even if you're a main sort of line, brand that's stocked in Asda or Sainsbury's or whatever, that's really, really valuable. The last thing anybody marketeer and anybody or any marketeer would ever want is to do something that everybody is already doing. So often we have conversations about what's the trends, what's happening next, what's what's the big new title, what's the release that everybody's looking forward to next year. And that's really valuable information. I just don't think that if you're, say, for example, the person who's got their head down gearing towards Final Fantasy 16 launch at the moment, that you've got much time in your hands. So an agency like IGN becomes really, really important, because it means that you've kind of got somebody working there in the background getting all these partnerships, which are actually really vital to the marketing mix in general. It can help money spread a lot further. It can create really cool moments. It can be a defining thing for your game and your release, and actually means that you can get your head down working on getting that game to release, getting that DLC live, getting the patch update, whatever you need to do. Again, it's a we're a really, really safe pair of hands when it comes to gaming, not only just for that strategizing part, those knocking those door down and going to do that education and making sure that everybody knows about your release, but also the implementation of it as well. If you're whatever game company, and you're trying to work with a brand, the last thing you want to do is be battered with 30, 40 emails a day about, asset approval process. Like, we take that on and almost like, you go over there, buddy, and you do what you need to do. We'll make sure we get this project live. And that's kind of why we're just so full service as an agency. We tend to take everything from start to finish. And I think our clients really, really appreciate that.
Okay, so you mentioned Fortnite. Is that a partnership that Allied has work on, or is that just one of the partnerships that you mentioned because you know it's a big one that a lot of people will have heard of?
No, it's not a client that we have, to be honest. Like, Fortnite, via Epic Games, are so good at doing it themselves. I think they have a monster sales team
Okay,
behind.
so they do it. So they're one of the ones
They
that
go out and do it
do it
themselves.
internally.
And that's because, Fortnite, slash Epic Games has realised there's a really, really strong revenue model
It
in.
is for them. It's been insane. It's kind of a shame because they've kind of become what Valve became, where they had Half Life. Yay, made money, but didn't make as much money as Steam did, and obviously Dota did for them. So they just. I mean, I appreciate they when they release games, it's of a high quality, but I feel like they've canned projects just because they know they're going to be getting money from Steam, from Dota, from like they're the biggest game secondary game distributor publisher in the world, bigger than PlayStation, bigger than Xbox, bigger than Nintendo, all those guys. And I feel like Epic has become that, where they had Unreal, they had games like Quake and that, but they've stopped doing the Unreal games effectively, and just focus on Fortnite. Hopefully they allocate some of that budget and release like a really good Unreal. I would love that, but unfortunately I feel like it never works out that way.
Yeah, and I feel like Epic are focused on. I don't know if you saw that presentation they did a couple of months ago, but like, I feel like Fortnite is just a cash cow, right?
It
It's
is
the
literally
thing that,
it's
like,
printing money
generates,
for them.
yeah, it generates the money they need to go and do something really, really cool, and especially around a lot of the stuff that's happening with like mixed reality and stuff now. Like, I feel like that's the game they're playing. They're not, Fortnite is great. They're happy with it. They've got a sales team that works away. They pull off some really cool stuff. Their audience seems to really, really to enjoy it, but I don't think Epic are focused. That's not their primary driver. Their primary driver is to do mixed reality, metahumans, all that kind of stuff. In the same way that, like, Xbox isn't really playing the console game anymore. They're like, you know what? We don't want to play console wars anymore. We're not competing against PlayStation. We're our own thing now. So yeah, I feel like that's kind of you, and we know that, right? Because we work in the industry and we're familiar with games and whatever. But if you're head of marketing for P&G or Unilever or L'Oreal, whatever, all you're seeing is everybody's in Fortnite. Your kids are talking about Fortnite. Their friends are talking about Fortnite. And
Everyone's heard of it, even if
yeah,
it's the modern Call of Duty. Because I remember when I was a kid, Call of Duty was that game everybody had
yeah,
heard of.
yeah.
And
Uh,
they knew someone. They knew a kid, like a child that played it. They knew a cousin. They knew a friend, or they played it. Or they had people created groups and they played it. And obviously, it's funny because Call of Duty is trying to become what Fortnite is now with Warzone. Effectively, they're putting more effort into that than their core, Call of Duty game, especially the single player aspect. Even though that, for me, that's where I play the most these
well,
days,
yeah,
because I don't have as much, time, now that I'm older, busy with other stuff. But yeah, the industry definitely after Fortnite and PUBG, I think things really changed. Like everyone just started going onto that, arena style, genre. Everyone just wanted to do it.
yeah. And I think that's
Easy
so much of,
money.
like, the education that we have to do now is about how to do gaming partnerships authentically. And like, I'm a gamer myself. I've played games since I was like 10, 11 years old. And like, those conversations for me is, yeah, you could do Fortnite, that's great, it's a great game, people love it, whatever. But what are you actually trying to do here? Because not everyone on the planet plays Fortnite. And, I
No.
always liken it to entertainment, in the sense that, like, there are games that we play when we want something soul nourishing, and there are games that we play when we, want an easy ride. and everybody kind of dips their toe in and out depending on, you know, what their taste is and how you're kind of feeling that day. But like, you know, so much of that conversation is, it's not just two titles that kind of dominate. There's something for everybody, and it's about recognizing these cultures and these communities that play these titles. So, you know, whether you love Hades or Hotline Miami, or you're banging to Hogwarts Legacy, which is incredible, by the way.
Yeah, my wife loves it. I mean,
I love
she's
that
been
game.
playing that. I watched her play it because she's the Harry Potter fan, not me. But I watched her play it, and I'm like, it actually looks really good. So I said to myself, because I'm in the middle of a bunch of other games. Once I actually get a bit of downtime in terms of gaming, I feel like it ain't gonna be for a while with the way gaming is, especially this year. I've had some solid games, and I've got a backlog of other stuff like
Yeah,
God of War that I still need to play, and Spider Man's coming out soon. But once I get a bit of downtime, I said I'm going to pick up Hogwarts Legacy because it just looks so fun, so expansive, and so well made. Especially after, because it got delayed so many times,
yeah,
and when they released it, it actually worked. Performance was good, the story, from what I can tell, was good. People loved it. Then you get games like Jedi Survivor, which I'm in the middle of. They delayed it, but they launched, and it was buggy. I mean,
haven't it had like a million patches?
it
This is a
has, but it's still buggy though right now. PC
yeah,
fans are. Like, I'm playing on PlayStation 5. The original Fallen Order I played on PC, and I remember at the time there was, even though my machine was high end, it was still lagging, certain parts, and I just felt like they just didn't obviously optimize it that well. And now with Jedi Survivor, what I've read about it being on PC is just disgraceful.
yeah,
PS5, Xbox, not too bad, but again, there are just certain moments, and it just starts slowing down the frame rate. Then I'm getting screen tearing as well, and
yeah.
I look at it and I think screen tearing usually is not a thing in console games. Like that's one of those things they kind of just iron out in console games, and you get it in PC, especially if you don't have something like NVIDIA G-Sync or AMD's FreeSync enabled, or so something along those lines. But I'm getting it on console and in performance mode, it's a bit annoying.
Shocking as well, because you know that game was cost you 70 quid or something
Yeah,
ridiculous.
it's cost them money. It's not even like they've done it on a budget. It's costing everyone money, and it's
Yeah.
a sequel. And on top of that, they didn't use Unreal Engine 5. They used Unreal Engine 4, which was well established. That was one of the reasons for using it, because I actually had somebody who worked on the game on the podcast
Oh,
about,
amazing.
yeah, about a couple 2.5 months ago, and they said one of the reasons they used UE4 instead of Unreal Engine 5 was that Unreal Engine 4 had been out for ages. They was obviously already partway in development when UE5 came out, and there was a lot more support. It was more robust. So it's like, why is this even happening? And I,
But
I
then
don't know why.
I think it's I think we've seen a glut of issues across the gaming industry with rushing out releases,
For
and
sure.
so much of of that conversation has happened because of unfortunate things that happened with Cyberpunk. But Cyberpunk is fixed now and it's awesome. But then also, what I would say is, if you know your game is going to be like that, right, and you know that it's about figuring out repeat play and how to draw people back to that game, and they have, because they cost so much money, you have to make a certain amount of money in so many days and all this kind of stuff. For me, that marketing life cycle now has become way more focused on pre-order. So you look at something like, even like Final Fantasy 16 storming demo, right? Everybody's losing their minds over it, but that's because they know it's about hands-on time of the game. So even having conversations with brands and stuff, and publishers now will say to them, actually, where does this fit into your marketing life cycle? Is it about launch, or is it about post-launch and having, maybe more with some live service games, to sort of narrative focused games? Or is it something that we want to make this like giant moment out of launch, or out of pre-order going into launch, so everything feels like it's a really joint up and we're constantly talking to the audience? I think that assessment of, actually, how do people feel about their game? There's always, are they feeling nervous about it? Is it a anticipated title? Is it being compared to other things, and kind of having that in your memory? I don't think a lot of agencies, and we've had this feedback as well, a lot of agencies that people work with actually game and actually understand the importance of these things and maybe really have.
Yeah, they probably don't. There's a lot of people that have some sort of hand in the gaming industry somehow. And again, you don't have to be the hardcore gamer that's
No,
platinum
you
in
don't.
every gamer or trying to get that 1,000 gamer score on every game. It doesn't have to be that. But dabble in it a bit. It's like at school when you had a French teacher that had never been to France, and it just felt a bit
It's exactly that.
strange.
Is like, have you ever been to France? Might be my new sarcastic comeback.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's exactly that. Is they don't really understand, the cultural nuances of these things. And actually, if someone's banding around a game that's famously broken as comparison, do we need to, as an agency, do a bigger job of making sure we get, people demo things into stores? Do we partner with a fashion brand to elevate it? Do we something? It's all that assessment that actually we really take pride in as an agency. My team are all gamers, so we're all nutso gamers. Like, we literally spend so much of our time watching trailers and talking about stuff and pulling stuff apart and figuring out theories and all this sort of stuff, that actually to have a team that really cares about your title, what that means to people. We will, if we're working on something that we maybe, might not be familiar with, we all have friends. So, the homework will be for the weekend is go and harass any friends that you know about X, Y, and Z game. And we always come back and do a presentation to one another. We sit and watch hours and hours of Twitch footage. So I don't think that's something that, I don't think that level of passion is always prevalent in other agencies. But, I think that's kind of what I would always say to someone that, potentially is looking at Allied, especially for the games team, as a potential new agency, is we will just love your game and we'll figure out what its place is in market, and we'll really get under the skin and figure out what's right for that community, and ultimately what's just going to make a really cool moment for the community as well.
So talking about games that effectively flop when they come out, has Allied ever worked on a campaign? Let's say for a big game like Jedi Survivor, where there's a huge pre-existing fan base, there's a lot of hype, everyone's excited, and obviously Allied spent a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of hours on getting this, the campaign solid. It comes out, the campaign's great, but then all of the problems around the game, whether it's the cyberpunk style issues, the Jedi Survivor, whether the game's fine, but there's some sort of controversy around it, maybe to do with the development team or the subject matter. And then like, how does Alloy deal with that? And yeah, why is that whole process internally, like, when something like that happens and it's not Allied's fault, but they've kind of, they're attached to it, by name in the industry?
Yeah. So we haven't had that sort of scenario whilst I've been at Allied, but I've had that instance when I've been at other businesses, say if a game reviews really badly,
Mm-hmm.
but then, ads are plastered all over the site, or, it's
Yeah.
full site takeover for whatever game. And to be honest with you, though it's been, I think the first time it happens, you feel like your heart is going to drop out of your
Mm.
butt. You don't know what to do with yourself. You're just mortified. But ultimately, like, those, it's good for games to be reviewed objectively, first of all. And I think actually sites like IGN and Metacritic and Eurogamer and all those kind of sites are getting much better now at trying to create a median score review. So it's not just one person's siloed view of things. It's like a community saying, well, it's actually great for story, but not so hot on graphics and all this sort of stuff. So I think that, the fact that it's reviewed objectively is always a really good thing. I think if something isn't the way that, you want it to be, you kind of have to take it on the chin. Like, I think you haven't, the way that I've always viewed it is, oh, I haven't made it. It's kind of got nothing to do with me. I acted, in my best interest, or my client's best interest, to get them a cool partnership that really, really works. Like, it's a bummer for sure when something maybe doesn't land the way that you want it to. But then I also think that the gaming industry sometimes, and this is more so of like, community opposed to people in the industry, is it's really hard getting stuff made. Like, getting stuff made and getting stuff released is like an uphill battle. And I think even if you get something to release day, regardless of, we always do everything right with the best intentions. We want to be successful. We want to do something amazing. We want to get the recognition for something. But Sometimes that might be a stretch too far. Your budget might have been pulled back. There might have been internal issues at your developer for whatever reason. But I think there is something about just standing in the moment and just being, well, I'm proud about what I did. That campaign looked great and the client was really happy with that. If I'm very lucky that I've never worked on something that has been linked to any controversy. So I can't answer the question kind of fully, but I have definitely worked on things that have reviewed badly, and we've kind of just had to say, you have to say to your client, I'm really sorry about it, has reviewed badly. I'd obviously have to bring that to your attention. And the client normally, to be honest with you, the client normally knows it's coming. Whatever developer normally, has some sort of insight into, oh, the game's a bit broken, or it's a bit, development hell, whatever it may be. So when those reviews come out, it's never a nasty surprise. I think everybody normally knows what kind of ride they're in for, but you do what you can to celebrate the high points of the game.
Okay, so obviously we've been talking about your role at Allied Global. I think people would like to know, how you got your job there. Is there a story behind that, and what was the interview process like?
So it honestly, dumb luck. I think dumb luck has helped me throughout my career. So I had left IGN and was on a bit of a break, just kind of figuring out what I wanted to do. And literally, a recruiter that I spoke to, maybe a couple of months before that, and had this ridiculously long conversation about Final Fantasy VII. Came back to me and said, "Oh, they're looking for someone who's really into gaming. You'd be a great fit." And then I met Melanie Wills, who is our VP for partnerships. So she heads up our whole division in the UK and EU. She sits across gaming and entertainment because we look after Amazon Prime on the entertainment side. And just really hit it off with her. She's one of the nicest, most supportive people that I have ever met. She's a great boss, and we just kind of immediately clicked. The interview process was really, really thick and fast. I think I had my initial interview on a Monday, and I think by Wednesday night I had got the job. So really, really thick and fast. And I think, I'd met like 3 or 4 people across the business in those days. And I think, in any interview, you get a sense really, really quickly of the kind of person that you're working for. I think sometimes you go into things and you have reservations about what you're doing on a daily basis, or what the team dynamic is like, but straight away I kind of got a sense of everybody. So yeah, it was really thick and fast. I don't think I've ever been through an interview process just as speedy as that, but I think it's once that you like someone, then you know that you can do the job, and you know what the expectations are of you, then it kind of all makes sense and it all clicks into place.
Okay, so if somebody wants to get into the gaming industry, they don't necessarily want to work on products, making games, for example. They want to work in some sort of middleman agency like Allied. What tips would you give to somebody to now that you've gone through the interview process, you've been in the industry for a few years, what tips would you give to stand out, to conduct yourself and make yourself more attractive and presentable?
I love it when people put their favorite games on their CV. That's a
Okay.
real favorite thing of mine. And that's
In what way? Like at the top,
literally, just a sentence of, if you're going for a game, I'm not saying that, if you're not going for gaming jobs, do that, because that makes less sense if you're going into
yes. If you're going for a web development role, don't start talking about your love of Zelda for 2
yeah,
paragraphs.
yeah, exactly. But if you're applying for a marketing job or whatever in games, then calling out what your favorite games are, because then it's an immediate conversation point, I think. If your favorite game is Sonic or Zelda or whatever it may be.
Especially if there's a story, I guess, behind that as well. Something from your childhood, or because that's always a great talking point. Not only obviously your favorite game, if you're going into the gaming industry, but if there's some story behind it, it really does help, and especially if the game that you like is very well liked by most people. Like Sonic, like Mario, Fortnite now, Clash of Clans, these sort of games, you'll probably get most people that'll be like, oh, I've either heard of it or I, do love it as well. Because you could like some more obscure game, yeah, fair enough, put that on there, but I feel like if you really love Super Mario Galaxy or something, or you love playing Mario Kart on the weekend with your kids, I feel like that'll resonate more with the
I don't
interviewer.
know if that's true. If someone wanted to like something completely obscure that I'd never played but could talk to me about
Mhm.
it, that's the thing that would stack up for me. I almost think like if they put Mario on there, I'd be like, okay, join the rest of the world.
But I think
Um,
they're different. My wifey wasn't Mario Galaxy or Mario Kart. Wifey's one of the Marios that you think, oh, I wouldn't
yeah,
immediately pick that one.
yeah. I think as long as someone talks, there's a thin line I think between it coming across as lazy. Because if someone put my favorite game is Sonic, you'd be like, okay, buddy, like okay, and kind of roll your eyes a little bit. But I think if someone came to me and said, like, I love gaming and my favorite games are, I don't know, they love the first Bioshock and they're excited to play Lies of P and they're really into Destiny, I'd be like, okay, talk to me about why you like these games. And I think that's what sets a lot of people apart, is being able to talk about something really fluently to someone who maybe doesn't know what you're talking about. So I've done interviews where you say to someone, oh, they say, oh, I love gaming. Okay, talk to me. And they can't quite describe what the thing is. And I'm like, well, that's your kind of first hurdle. And that's the kind of first problem, is if you can't just relay that information back, regardless if I'm a gamer or not a gamer, that's a problem, because you have to be able to hold your own in conversations. And I think, second of all, breaking something down into sort of distilling it almost really, really helps get that information across. So, like, I have not finished Bloodborne, but if you can tell me how to get through that game without crying at how many times I die, I will listen to you all day long. And I think that really, really helps. And it's, regardless if you're a gamer or not, I think just speaking about something really passionately and with knowledge and authority really puts you across. And I think that's half the reason I've got this far in my career, and I think I've done as well as I've done, is because I can talk about something, and 9 times out of 10 it is Final Fantasy VII. With it always is. I put it into every conversation I could possibly have, um, passionately, with knowledge, authoritatively. Like, we've had to do lots of conversations recently about titles that I know a lot about, but rest of our team don't know. And actually, it's so much fun just being able to kind of geek out for a little bit and just be like, right, it's this character in this thing, and this is how these things relate, and you could do this magic in the game, but these are your weapons, and you can go and get this ultimate weapon, and blah blah blah. I'm in a very, very, there are times when I'm at work and I think, oh my gosh, I'm in the world's most fortunate position, because I could be talking about mortgages for a living, but I sit here and talk about games. And I think that energy and excitement really it has helped me, set myself apart. Not saying that you have to be this high energy all the time, like, but I think the ability to know when to be excited and for someone to feel your excitement, whether you're in an interview or you're doing a pitch or whatever, really makes you stand out. Like, it's helped me no end.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like that outside experience, it's definitely invaluable. So obviously, so you mentioned, you worked at IGN previously.
Yeah.
What did you do there, and how did you get your job at IGN? And also on top of that, why did you leave IGN?
So I joined IGN, I think like September, October 2019. And I was a partnership manager there. So basically, that's working on the commercial team. So the people that are responsible for generating like fundamentally ad revenue for IGN. But my kind of expertise specifically is around what we call custom content. Now, custom content is basically when you have an advertiser, and all my people that I worked with were gaming companies, who basically want to make a bespoke video, article, event, whatever, that will basically be served out to the IGN audience. And the reason that's kind of my expertise is because, one, I'm a gamer and I kind of tend to know all the threads of things, and then second of all, it's really kind of a creative skill. And it tends to be a very fine balance between the creative and commercial skill. There's no point of producing a 10-minute IGN video on, the ins and outs of some game that nobody's ever really heard of. It's taking a title that potentially is releasing and really understanding the kind of key points of it, and actually how to make it really, really interesting to an audience. the reason I got my job there, again, it was just a fluke. Like my whole working career, it's just been a bit of a fluke. A recruiter came to me and basically said there was an opening at IGN. She knew I liked games from just passing conversation, and would I want to interview there? And I said yes. And then met the team there, who were lovely. And then I think I started like a couple of weeks after. It was, again, another quick turnaround. It was like, yes, I like it here. You like me. I like you. Great. Let's kind of go for it. And it was a weird time to join as well. I think it was a bizarre time, because I joined, and then we shortly went into lockdown with the pandemic, and all working from home for the first time, and kind of finding my way in a team. And I knew IGN is absolutely massive, so finding new structures and all that kind of stuff. And it was E3 was cancelled. And it was supposed to be the first year I was ever supposed to go. So I was absolutely heartbroken that I couldn't go to LA, and we all sat at home. It was awful. But, it was a great learning experience. I think, it was my first proper role in gaming, and really kind of understanding, the back end of what happens in launch cycles, the expectations of certain developers and publishers. You get shown lots of information, like how all the back end of the content, when you're producing these videos and stuff, all comes together. And it was a really, really good experience. Like, I think I worked with some of the best people that I've ever worked with at IGN. Like, I learned so much. And actually, that content team that is based in the UK is the best production team I've ever worked with. They are some of the most dedicated, knowledgeable, hardworking people that I've ever met. And I just, I owe a lot to them, just for really kind of teaching me how to do things properly. And I also had one of the best managers that I've ever had there as well. Her name is Louisa, and she was just a constantly encouraging presence. And I think some of it is, you kind of go into a business, and especially being a woman in gaming, I'm not a big drinker and all this kind of stuff. So you go into this kind of environment and it's all kind of new. But she was very much, never not give your opinion. If you think something doesn't work, always tell people why you think it and how, and you offer a solution. So yeah, she was, I think a lot of lessons that I learned from her, like I still do to this day, and actually how I manage my team. The reason that I left IGN, I think I just, with like anything, I think you get to a point, and you kind of go, what's next? Which is a bit of a weird place to be. I think we were fully out of the pandemic years. Everything was kind of going back to normal. And I was really successful at IGN. I worked on some amazing launches. Like, I did this big like Army of the Dead thing with Netflix, which was really cool. We did like a Instagram takeover. We did like Zack Schneider tweeted out at us, which was incredible. Like, it was the whole defining moment of my career. And worked on some really, really cool games. But I think with any job, regardless if IGN or not, you're so successful, and then you sort of go, now what do I do? What way do I go? How do I carry on? And it can be really difficult. I think especially, you get to a certain point in your career, and you kind of look around you, and you just kind of don't know which way the wind is blowing. Almost like you kind of go, okay, do I stay here and do I work my way up, or do I go somewhere else and upskill, or do I try to get into maybe like a brand marketing role or something like that. I think and some of it is just flat out boredom. You work on so many titles, you do the same thing over and over again, and it's, it can be really, really hard. And I think, I was at a point where, how old was I? I think I had just turned 35, I want to say. 35, or yeah, it must have been 35 or 30, or coming on to 36. And unfortunately, I'm one of those people that is absolutely dreading turning 40. And I kind of constantly had that in my mind of, I have to get to this certain point. I have to do this kind of thing. And, being, in the spirit of being completely transparent, I kind of had a little bit of a mental sort of, not breakdown, but almost like oh God, like what am I doing? And I kind of had to completely withdraw. So I took another job, and it just ended up just not being the right thing. And then I took 3 or 4 months off to really kind of sit with the feeling of uncomfortableness. Like, what do I do next? What am I passionate about? And I think, I have been working since, I came out of university. So you get to a certain point and you sort of go, okay, you never really have a pause, if you know what I mean. I know that sounds kind of a bit woolly, but you never really stop to assess how you feel about your career and what you actually want out of it. You're always focused on the next project or getting the next client or doing the next, bunch of revenue, whatever it is. And really, I kind of had to sit and really kind of figure out what I wanted, which sounds like it would be really easy, but it literally took me like 3 months to really kind of get my head around what was important to me and how I wanted to be. And so much, I think, of what I left IGN with was some internal baggage of, am I good enough for this? Do I fit into gaming? What's it like being an Asian woman in gaming? How do I make a difference for other people? And kind of feeling the weight of all these expectations that I put on myself. And then, I had that break and really came out of it, thanks to some really great, counseling, please look after your mental health. Like, I can't stress how important that is. But after that kind of time away, I kind of felt like there was just an absolute sea change for me internally. Like, I felt really confident in my knowledge. I love gaming. That's hard underlined. That's kind of how I feel about things. Second of all, I'm really good at kind of almost doing these like 360 Swiss Army knife marketing plans that, have a small budget but have to do a lot. Great, right? We know that I'm a really good problem solver. And then third of all, it was that kind of diversity, equity, inclusion piece that was really important to me. So I was a co-chair of the DEI committee at IGN. It was something that I still really felt passionate about. So I was just like, as long as something has those three things, I, will feel really, really good about it. And immediately after having that conversation with Mel at AGM, I just went, oh my God, tick, 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 tick. Like, it's really good energy. She loves the fact that I love gaming. She wants me to be that Swiss Army knife person. And, she was really impressed by some of the work that I'd done at IGN. So it's, it felt like a big catastrophe when I left IGN. And I felt like, it was almost like leaving school, and almost being in tears as you walk out the door, but you kind of have to move on. But yeah, that's a really long answer. I'm sorry, I kind of deviated massively.
No, that's obviously some of these, deviation answers can be, some of the best. So, you mentioned university. What did you
Yeah.
study there, and what would you recommend it to other people? And if somebody is going, what would you say to them to get the most out of university?
I honestly, I went to university in 2005, which honestly feels like a lifetime. Almost 20 years ago. 20 years ago. And I think university back then was completely different to what university is now. I don't know if I had my time again, which sounds like a really old lady answer, but it's not. If I would go to university, I think it was I mean, I went to Greenwich University and I studied English literature because I had no idea what I wanted to do and felt like I had to go because everybody else was going, which was not the best motivating reasons why. Probably also the reason why I barely went. But I think university now, and honestly, my heart breaks for people going to university. The cost of it is ridiculous.
And it's
And I
going up.
guess
It's going up soon again.
it's just shocking. I've got three younger sisters, and one is doing her masters at the moment, and it's just the amount of debt, bless her,
10
that is
grand a year just for course fees.
yeah, it is. And then she's the smartest person I've ever met in my whole entire life. Like, how we're related to each other remains a mystery. But she, that she's going to do it to a very specific thing. My partner went to university and did architecture. Again, very specific thing. But I think, if you have it available to you, take it for the experience for what it is. Learn what you can. And for me, I feel like it was more about the socializing and the confidence and getting to know yourself as a person. I would say what I learned at university was how to read really quickly and then shuffle on to something else. And I am not, the sort of person as a hiring manager or whatever is only looking for people who are at university. I don't really care, to be honest with you. If I had a school leaver that came out at, what do they come out at, 16? and said, I just really love gaming and I really want to learn. And this is what I know about marketing. I'm a brand new, fresh canvas, but I want to learn and I have the right attitude. I'd be like, great, perfect. That's the kind of attitude I want. Um, for me, it's just, I don't see it as a massively important part. Now, that's not to discount that experience. Like people that have gone to university for 3 or 4 years, like our graduate Amy that works in our team, is fantastically smart and sharp, and she's a great person to work with. Um, but I also don't want to say, well, you only have to go to university, you only have to follow this path, and this is going to get you X, Y, and Z. Because if anything, my career has been like, I went to university and I came out into sales jobs selling like legal conferences and accountant conferences for the first 2 years just to make some money. But I've ended up ultimately where I wanted to be. So I wouldn't want to advise on either way, because it is no way a shortcut to success or a shortcut to a certain path, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Like, if I could go back to uni and do it differently, the main thing I would do differently is this not necessarily the socialization aspect, but the networking aspect
Yeah,
of it. And what I would say to anyone listening is when you I would say when you leave uni, obviously leave with a degree, leave with you've passed, you've had fun, you made friends, and ideally you've got a good grade as well. That all helps, but leave with like knowing 5 to 10 people really well, like a close circle of friends that
yeah,
aren't necessarily and ideally not doing what you're doing, because if you're a programmer like me, I can get in contact with programmers pretty easily through people or the people I know. That's not going to be a difficult thing for me. But I think what would be amazing is if, let's say, you're a programmer, you leave, you've got like 5 or 10 close friends that you all love each other like brothers or sisters. And one's a doctor, one's a lawyer, one's a programmer, one's an artist, one's an architect, one's whatever. And not only obviously will it expand your horizons and the way you think, it will also be beneficial because if there's something legal that you need doing, yes, they're probably not going to do something that will take 2 weeks of work for free, but you could probably pop them a message and be like, what do you think of this? And they'll be like, no, 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 don't do that. That's just like, it's really going to mess you up. And vice versa. If they need a website and you're a programmer, they can message you and you can say, oh, try this, this, and this. So that's what I would say. Try and get a group of friends that are that are in different careers. And I'll say the best way. Again, I haven't done this first time because obviously this is advice that I would give to myself and others, and obviously I didn't really do it, but would be join clubs that aren't related to your
mm,
course. So again, for me, because I did programming, don't join a programming or game dev club. Join that if you want to, but to get friends with other people in other industries, uh, join like some, I don't know, a photography club or an astronomy club, for example. You're gonna get such a wide group of people, like a film club. I bet you all unis have some sort of film club where they just enjoy watching films. Do something like that to get that that core circle of people together.
yeah. I always feel so, it's really interesting. I always feel so, especially, again, another old lady answer coming through, but the older that I get, the more I'm just like, just enjoy it. Who cares? Like, honestly, if you told, at 18, if I think about my 18-year-old self now, I think you would, you're a baby, you're an idiot. Just go and be out in the world, learn how to look after yourself, learn how to just be in the world and feel confident and feel comfortable. Um, I think sometimes as well, and I see it sometimes with especially graduates or people or school leavers that are kind of around at the moment, is there is such a weight of expectation on them that you have to network and you have to do this kind of stuff, and you have to be really active across LinkedIn and social and all these kind of things. And I think sometimes, and I would say this about general media and not just gaming, like I've been in a sort of media industry for about 10 years now, is that we put far too much expectation on people. And it's almost like that, joke about it's an entry level position, but they want 7 years experience. We kind of, we kind of do that to graduates and school leavers and people applying for internships. I think we just put too much expectation on them, and I think someone that and I think if you do that, you're only ever going to get a certain type of person in your business. And, that's really when diversity tends to take a massive, massive downturn. And I've seen it, I've been at media owners. So, people that own magazines and stuff, and have just looked around the room and not seen people like myself. I've seen other, those kind of like very go-gettery type A personalities that are, all from, very well-off backgrounds that, don't have to worry about money, that can spend all this extra time doing whatever they want to do in specific sort of clothes. And it made me feel teeny tiny as a person and really kind of affected me. And I almost, when I got to IGN and there were just other people like me there, right? People that loved games and people from all different backgrounds. And IGN was really, really good at making sure there were different, lots of different perspectives and people from different backgrounds working there. So I felt much more at home in that environment. So I would almost say, though it is good to have an eye on the future, I think when you're 18, just, it's the first time you're on your own. Just be comfortable with the uncomfortableness of learning to grow up. And I think, that would be enough for me. I think if I had to go back and give myself advice.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you got to get that balance. So you mentioned that you worked in the magazine industry. You worked at Hearst magazine. Like, what was that experience like? What did you do there, and how did that sort of help you transition to a company like IGN?
Yeah, so oh God, I feel like this is a lifetime ago now. So I went there after working at a Boots Health and Beauty magazine, which again was a great experience. And it was just, again, it's that thing about wanting more and wanting to do more. So again, I worked in their commercial team, working specifically across digital. So basically, going to media agencies like Mediacom and Essence and M6 and all these kind of middle-air agencies, who basically look after a brand's budget to spend on advertising. And you go to them and you basically trying to convince them to give you money for specific things. Hearst was an interesting experience. I think I got there and found it really, really difficult. A lot of people there were, of a certain ilk, right? They were well off, had really nice clothes, and had been in the media industry for a really long time, so knew how everything worked. And I found myself kind of drowning amongst a sea of people and found it really hard to stick out. It's that commercial team that I worked in. It's probably different now, but my experience of it was that I just found it incredibly pressured. The manager that I had at the time was just not very supportive. It was very focused on, you have to make this amount of number, and if you don't make it, you've got to stand in a room and tell people why you haven't made this kind of money. And it was all really, really ridiculous. And I think at that time, I think I'd maybe been in that job for like 6 months, and then a family member had an illness that was obviously a very sort of traumatic time for myself and my family, as we kind of learned how to kind of deal with things. But my experience at Hearst was they were not supportive of that, so I just found it really hard to be around that. And did I learn a lot about commercial businesses? Probably not. Did I learn how to fight my way to a specific point? Absolutely. I think, as home stuff got a lot easier and things started to kind of taper off, there was a incubator program that they launched, which was basically people in the business could apply to basically not work their jobs for, I think, like between 6 and 8 weeks, to come up with a brand new business idea for Hearst. And you had to go through an interview process. And I just kind of did it because it just seemed like a really cool thing. I'd never really done it before. And they picked me. And I was just my confidence was so low at the point. I was just so shocked that they picked me. I think I burst out into tears. But that incubator program that I did at Hearst was one of the best things that I've ever done. I don't think they do it anymore. I think the chap left, who basically used to run that program. But it taught me so much about myself and actually where I naturally fit into a group dynamic. It was people that I think I knew one person in that group, because she used to kind of semi work with our team, but otherwise they were brand new people that I hadn't worked with before. And naturally I found myself kind of falling into this leadership role. Well, no, this is what we're going to do, and this is going to how we're going to get organized, and all this kind of stuff. And all of a sudden I kind of discovered this power that I had never sort of even seen myself show before. And people were really respectful and kind of asking me advice and figuring out how to do things. And all of a sudden I was kind of flexing, it did get to the point where I was probably flexing towards the end and maybe a little bit overconfident. But from going into that program and being like confidence on the floor, not sure if I was gonna see out the month of that business, it just totally changed for me, and it made me feel much more powerful myself. Felt like I knew myself a lot better. I knew what I could make work. And that's actually about the point that that IGN job came along. So it was almost, again, it really does just boil sometimes down just to dumb luck. So I finished that program, and then that IGN job came along, and I was just like handing my notice, like I don't, that's it. I'm going to go work there because that seems way more fun than this. I think if I went back now, and obviously hindsight's 2020, I'd probably go with a very, very different attitude. But and I think media, much like gaming, to be honest, is kind of overdue a bit of a reckoning when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, how it treats people from different backgrounds, the role of women in those organizations, and do we give them a fair chance? So yeah, it was it was an interesting experience, not wholly positive, but I came out of there and felt like I had a better grip on myself as a person.
Okay, so you touched on, being a woman in the industry. So, what's it like being a woman in the gaming industry? And, like, how do you survive and ultimately thrive in a male dominated industry like that?
Yeah, I think like I can only speak to my experience to it, and I think there have been lots of reports and allegations over the last couple of months that have still not really kind of woken up the industry as to how deep the issues are. So I kind of want to make a call out to that, because though I have had a semi easier time, there are people within our industry, whether they're women, non-binary, gay, whether you fall into whatever bracket you fall into, basically if you're not a man you might have had a slightly trickier time. So I just kind of want to call that out, because I think with gaming, I don't feel that we've moved on as an industry quite yet. And I think there's still a lot of work we had to do. Like, I think as a woman in an industry, definitely the experience that I have had is people do not expect me to be as confident or as knowledgeable as I am. I think they kind of see that you're a woman, and sometimes, and it's something that drives me crazy, and that I am very, very, that I call out, is this kind of almost male, it tends to be a male trait, not saying all men do it, but I've just seen typically males exhibit this, is this weaponized incompetence. Someone told me this phrase a couple of years ago, and now I can never shift it from my brain, but it's giving, if there's something to organize, or things are a bit of a mess, or we have to organize a party or whatever, it falls to a woman to do that, and it's like, oh, I can't do that, you're better at doing it, and all that kind of stuff. And that's definitely been my experience in other jobs, to do it. And I think there is still this, I'm trying to think of the right way to put it. Definitely my experience has been, there is still this kind of like male down the pub, oh, I know you, we've gone out on the getting drunk together or whatever. And I think that can create a really closed off environment, especially for someone who isn't a drinker, like regardless of your gender. So I still think there's still a lot of change that kind of needs to happen. And, you know, whether that's hiring, you know, more women in marketing roles from my perspective, or even just in development roles. And I think, you know, especially, and it can be really, really disheartening sometimes to work on something. You know, sometimes we'll speak to a client, or talking to a prospective client, and it's a game and it's a character that has the sort of stereotypical female gaming shape, which is, you know, teeny tiny waist, super smooth skin, bowling ball boobs. And you're like, how are we still doing this in 2023? This is like not how we should be working as an industry. This is not representative of people that are playing these kind of games. And there was a campaign a couple of weeks ago, and it's Dove and Unreal Engine. I don't know if you've seen it.
I'm not too sure. I mean, if you explain it,
Basically,
I'll let you know if I have.
he's like stereo. It's like all done in you know, gaming capture footage, and basically it's this sort of stereotypical gaming shape. You know, she's really tall, statuesque, completely beautiful, blemish free, you know, amazing boobs, all this kind of stuff. And she's a warrior woman. And the game finishes, and she comes out, and she basically like unclenches, so she pulls off her girdle. She's got a normal female body that's like soft and squishy in parts. She's got a nice little round face. She just looks like a normal woman. And someone had shared that on LinkedIn and was saying, oh, you know, it's fantasy, why do we have to have women that look like this, and all this kind of stuff. And it just made my heart sink. And I remember I reposted the video with them like on LinkedIn, like smashing my keyboard. I was really angry about it. And it's comments like that that just shows that we really haven't come on. And this was someone, you know, the person that made the comment about, oh, you know, why do we have to see bodies like this? It's fantasy. They're superheroes. They have to do something. I'm like, if it's make believe, if it's fantasy, then why do they need to have this body shape? That's a ridiculous backwards notion. If you can have dragons, you can have normal bodies. And I think that perspective still prevails today. And it's incredibly frustrating to see. You know, I still feel like, even for someone like myself, like I'm an Asian woman, and I still haven't seen a version of myself in a game, which is horrifying. Like I see it starting to come through, you know, mainstream movies and all that kind of stuff, very slowly, I might add, like not at the rate it should be at all. But I do not see myself in gaming, and I feel, you know, it's all kind of. I feel like gaming is at a really interesting point. Like someone told me the other day that we're almost at the 10-year point from Gamergate. And how much actually have we come on as an industry? And I don't think that much. I think we have guardrails in to protect people from lawsuits, but I don't feel we're having honest conversations about, you know, what it's like to work in the industry. You know, are we you know, not punishing those, but, you know, making sure that there are instances where people feel comfortable to share their experiences, and forums where people, you know, from, you know, have platforms to discuss these things and freely, and feel like they're supported by the industry and they're not going to get sacked for saying certain things, or whatever. It's so not where it needs to be. It's kind of frustrating. And I think, you know, so much of, and I actually think that I saw that post about the Dove thing, which I loved, right? And so many people that I know loved. And I immediately joined Women in Games, because I was just like, it can't be enough to complain about it. We kind of are at the point now where I feel like, okay, I am confident enough, I'm knowledgeable enough, I have a big enough voice where, you know, I think if I can make those, if there are changes to be made, that I want to make some of those, I want to contribute. So yeah, it's still really a mixed bag, but I think we're, you know, I think the progress, if we had to put a percentage on, is it at like 20%? It's just not where it should be at all.
Okay, so you mentioned, you know, like women in games. So you're an ambassador for women in games. You know, what do you do as an ambassador, and what does the organization do in general for those that haven't heard about it?
So, Women in Games is a UK-based organisation which is basically giving women that work in the industry a platform to share their stories, elevate each other, and ultimately give support to one another. The way that the organisation works is they often, you know, will support an event or have a presence in an event, so people, you know, can meet up and network and stuff. But it naturally creates this kind of almost like like natural tether to people. You know, like there are people that have reached out over the last couple of weeks that have seen stuff that I've posted, or you know, I'm showing off trailers or whatever, saying, "Oh, oh my gosh, you're a Women in Games ambassador," and it kind of naturally creates this kind of space where you can kind of talk about things. I think my goal as a brand new sort of ambassador is to really start connecting people. And I think something that I'm working on at the moment is to almost have these like events where people are really able to share their experiences regardless of what it is. So, you know, I touched a little bit earlier on kind of mental health and ultimately what was burnout. I know it's how to navigate and recognize things like burnout, how to utilize your network, if you want to upskill in your business, how to negotiate pay rises. It's all these kind of questions. And that's kind of what I did is they said, "Oh, you're an ambassador." I was like super, super happy. But I almost like sat down and almost wrote like probably a page front and back of all the advice that I wish I'd gotten, all the things that I wanted to learn, and was like, okay, I kind of need people to fill these gaps. And almost, you know, if I could give advice to my younger self, what would it be? And that's kind of my ambition really over the next kind of 12 months is to arm people with the tools to make their position better somehow. So whether it's, you know, navigating some of those mental health challenges, or how to navigate, you know, internal politics, or even just creating a support group of, you know, people that are from all different places across the industry. You know, I was saying earlier, like you work on a product for 12 months and that's all you're in this tunnel, right? You're siloed and you don't really see much of else of anyone. But with Women in Games, it kind of creates this, you know, natural connection for people. So you're able to share your stories and talk about things that are affecting you and almost feel like you have that support network in place. So there's lots of stuff kind of coming up over the next 12 months. And, you know, I'm constantly on the lookout and roping people into kind of helping me do that stuff. And, you know, just because also it's called Women in Games doesn't mean that's only open to women. You know, if there are men that are looking to support, you know, their colleagues, or if you're non-binary or whatever you fall into, I think it's more just if you feel like you're a marginalized audience of people, like this is the space for you. And ultimately, like we can create a really comfortable environment where you're able to talk about things that are affecting you.
Okay, so how would somebody go about joining Women in Games?
So the process that I followed was, I think they have an intake. I think it's once every quarter, I want to say, and you basically fill out this application form, and they review it and your profile and all this kind of stuff, and then they basically let you know whether you're in or not. So it's fairly straightforward. But what I would say is, you know, it's an individual ambassadorship. So the onus is on you to do something. Like there isn't, though they have some Women in Games events, and then there's Women in Games International as well, which tends to be far more US focused, and they do lots of events. The onus is on you to do something. So if there is someone that's like listening and thinking about joining, absolutely do. But even if, you know, you're not sure and it's more just about, you know, aligning yourself with that group, like honestly, people reach out to me, connect with me, send me messages, because I think it's, you know, about creating a natural connection to support a cause. And, you know, if you want to join, you know, later or when you have more time or whatever, it's kind of however you really want to go at it. You have that kind of official ambassadorship. But then, you know, there are so many other ways to get involved as well, whether it's just kind of, you know, attending events and stuff.
Okay. And like obviously being a woman in the industry and being Asian as well, like what advice would you give to women who want to get into the gaming industry to help them stand out and also, you know, thrive against their male counterparts, but also to other people, you know, like Asians, black people, you know, and that anyone that, you know, might find it difficult compared to a white male, for example?
I think do not doubt yourself. You know, and it's easy for me to say that as somebody, you know, who's a little bit further on their career. But I would say, you know, if you're listening to this podcast and, you know, you're coming out of university or you're wanting to move into the gaming industry and you just want advice, please do message me. Like, I think almost like having an internal cheerleader really, really helps. And I think as long as you go in with that confidence and don't doubt yourself and don't make yourself smaller, like that is something I wish that I had shaken out of myself at a much younger age. Because I think back of all the times that I made myself smaller because, there was a male in the room who was louder and dominant and, was shouting louder than I could or wanted to. And actually, I let something slide when I shouldn't have. And that's a lesson that I've really had to learn over the last couple of years is, don't make yourself smaller. Because just because of the color of your skin or your sexual orientation or your gender or whatever, it doesn't make you any less valuable as a human being. Like what I was saying earlier is, it's about your unique perspective. You bring something to the table. Okay, you might not have 10 years in the industry, you might not know Final Fantasy in and out like I do, whatever, but you bring a unique perspective, and it's understanding what that unique perspective is. Now, that's not to say there will be someone like me or Mel or whoever at AGM, any other business, who will be there cheerleading you. But I think if you can walk into a room and really kind of know your power, know the power of your unique perspective, not make yourself feel smaller. I've been on interviews where it's been, little old me, like, and there's been a team of like, four, cis white guys sitting in front of me, and I've gone, oh, okay, and I've immediately receded back into my seat, and I think back on that, I go, why did you do that? Like, there was no reason for that, and it's this kind of like assumed smaller position that I've had to really talk myself out of. If you want to be in this industry, or if you want to go to any job, actually walk in there with confidence, know, and excuse my French here, shit forwards and backwards, and really just own that conversation. Like, you're not going to know everything, but it's the honesty about that. And it's also, just because of someone's position doesn't mean they're above you. No one is ever above you. They can be equal to you, but they're never above you. And that's something that I've had to teach the grads when they've had to go and have conversations with these like big scary brands and stuff. It's like, they're not, just because they work at so and so doesn't mean they're like 50 steps above you and you're looking up in the heavens begging them for a favor. You go in there with your unique perspective, you go in there with confidence, and you tell people, this is what I want to do. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't because of the patriarchy or whatever. But I think it's, if there are times where you feel that you maybe haven't been given a fair shot, I think it's about looking to support groups, like Women in Gaming, to say, I've had this, happen to me. I went for an interview at blah, 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 and they made me feel small, and I don't feel like I was given a fair shot, because we are here to support people. So, if someone came to me to say, this has happened to me, like, you would fight tooth and nail for that person, because everyone deserves a fair shot. There, like, should just be no arguments about it. So yeah, again, long-winded answer.
Okay, so now, what's your experience been in terms of pay compared to your male colleagues? Because obviously we've discussed, your experience in terms of working and maybe feeling small compared to some of the louder male colleagues. But what's the pay like? Because that's always a big discussion, about females, especially when you're looking for equality. Is that females are paid less? And then obviously you get people that say that's definitely true. You get people that say that it's not true, or there's a bit more nuance than that. Like, how has your experience been?
So it's really difficult with pay, because I think in most businesses that I've worked at have been very guarded.
Mm-hmm,
And
obviously,
don't have the visibility. There has been an instance where someone has been, and I won't say what business I was at, but they hired someone the same time as me who was more senior. And you think, okay, great, more senior, cool, whatever. Probably on more money than I am, cool, whatever. And they were the most useless person I'd ever met. And this person would come to work, disheveled, late. There'd been times that they had come in and just sat at their desk and watched TV and stuff. And this person 100% was more senior, on paper was more senior, had more experience than I did, and obviously getting more money with that senior job title. And still, I wasn't being promoted. Like, I was, doing my numbers. I was doing really, really well. Everything was happening that it needed to. But this person managed to like coast on through. And I feel like that's kind of been my, you know, experience of where that system has really kind of let me down. Is, well, I did all the work, I'm doing more than X person, but that person somehow is more senior than I am.
Yeah, I mean, but do you think that that was an issue because you was a woman, and I'm assuming that the person was because yeah, I don't think you explicitly said, but I'm assuming he was a guy.
Yeah, he was
Yeah,
a guy,
he was a guy.
and I
Yeah.
think, you know, and I'm sorry, the story's missing some context. So that person was actually very very good friends with the head of our department, who was
I mean,
also
yeah,
a
there
guy.
you go. I think that's what it
Yeah.
ultimately,
So, and then
comes
what they
down
would
to.
do
So,
is they
so
would go to the pub together
yeah,
every time without fail, and it's like, you know, how does that work?
yeah, I mean, I think that's one of those more unfortunate situations, unless that okay, you're Asian and that you're a woman, but it's just that guy happens to know, the person who's, in
This
charge of that department.
person they didn't know each other before they started,
Okay.
so this was a newfound friendship.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably one of those things. Maybe like how at your interviews with IGN and Alloy that you just clicked over Final Fantasy and over that other thing that you mentioned as well. The dog. So I mean, so somebody listening might think, what does you having a dog and the person liking a dog in reality have to do with the job? Probably nothing, but it probably did help you. So I mean, there may have been something, again, not defending the guy, but there might have been something that he was into, possibly, that the other person that was at your company was into, and that
Yeah,
friendship was
I think
created.
there's definitely a challenge to that. My challenge to that thought is, okay, your personality will ultimately get you through the door, um, because ultimately they're hiring a person that they like and they can work with. But where does that line stop when it comes to performance?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. But like the thing is, I've seen guys that will just coast, will be useless, and they'll do really well career wise. And maybe that's because of network. Maybe it's because they get really good friends with the boss, and they go to the pub, blah blah blah, all that sort of stuff. And then you'll see another guy. So again, we're still just talking about men here. We're not factoring in any women or anything like that. And they'll be doing a much better job. They'll be hitting the numbers, or whatever the metric is, but they're just not really going up that much. And I think that's one of those unfortunate things, not to do with the gaming industry or tech industry, but just companies as a whole, that they don't make a conscious effort enough to recognize people that actually add value and that are really useful to the company, and to make sure that they get promoted, make sure they get rewarded and are treated well, compared to the people that you just know are useless,
Yeah,
and
I feel like that.
somehow they just coast.
I feel like that happens more to like that sort of coasting thing, especially from my experience, because it's happened a couple of times. Is more prevalent and is an easy opportunity for men. I
Yes,
don't.
I mean, I all 100% agree with that, because a lot of companies are male
I
dominated to some
don't know
extent.
if I've ever seen
I
that
mean, I guess if
with a
the company
female
was
colleague.
female dominated, it might be the other way around, but
Well,
unfortunately,
this is
because
the
it's
thing.
not.
Like I've worked in a female-dominated business, and it wasn't something that happened. Like everybody still had to perform. Like there was some favoritism in a previous role, but still everybody had to like
Hmm.
do the thing that they wanted to do, and everyone would still. The times when I have seen that sort of coasting mentality has definitely been from men, and again, it's that weaponized incompetence. Um, it's that, oh, I can't, well, the thing is, oh, well, you're much better at this. And then what you find is that women regard, and I do agree with you, I don't think it's pertaining specifically to gaming, but I feel like it's just a working world problem, is that there's a for want of a better phrase here, a slacking off from a male counterpart, which means that adds on another 20-25% to a woman's work. And that has happened to me a lot. So I agree that it is potentially not a gaming problem, but also it's like, if it's how, if it's happened, what's kind of the reason for happening for that? And it's also really hard for when that's happened to me to have conversations about, well, I don't think that's fair, when then all of a sudden you have this narrative that's placed on you as, oh, Jasmine's just being angry, or I've had comments like, oh, it's her time of the month and all this ridiculous stuff, and that's when it starts becoming about my
Yeah,
gender.
obviously stuff like that, and the reality is, again, I don't know if you did, but if you take that to HR, or your boss or whoever is in that position in the company, they should take that,
You'd be
seriously.
surprised how they don't. Like, I have left roles. I won't say again what roles it was, but over my working career, where I have said to HR, "This has happened. X comment was made," and nothing happened from it. I remember when I first started working, and this was maybe when I was like 21, 22. It was like literally first job out of university, and we would, you just bantering in the office, and I said, oh my gosh, I'm actually really, really afraid of clowns. And then, I was the only woman in a team of about 20 guys. Every single one of those guys proceeded to bombard me with pictures of horrific clowns, like eating people and all this kind of awful stuff, to the point where, I was only 21, 22, so it made me cry. I told HR, and they were just like, oh, that's just what they're like. It's just banter. We'll
Yeah,
talk to
I
just
mean,
banter.
I think when that sort of stuff happens, yeah, like 100%, agree that sort of stuff is wrong, and that sort of stuff still, exists in the working world. I think it's got better, and there's more opportunity to let somebody know. But again, it will obviously depend partly industry, but partly company as well, because some companies, especially some older legacy companies, because they'll have dudes there that have been there 20, 30 years. They're part of the furniture at that point,
But
and
then that just becomes another, to me, that's like so that's such that's a huge problem, because then you hear this excuse, oh, they're part of the old guard, is the one that just
yes,
drives
that term.
me.
Again,
Yeah,
when I say that, that I'm not defending it. I'm just, merely understanding, the reality
yeah.
of it. And I think on some newer companies that have only been around for 5, 10 years, most of the newer companies probably don't have, those sort of, issues. So it is unfortunate that if you want to, try and avoid that environment, which obviously everyone is entitled to, but the unfortunate reality is that's the world for now. There are at least companies that you can go and work for that will have a better working environment, whether that's you're a woman, you're young, you're not white, you're disabled, whatever it is, compared to, I don't know, some traditional media outlet, some newspaper, that's 50 to 100 years old. Their treatment of you is going to be totally different. So at least I'd say we've made progress in that. At least you have the opportunity to say, okay, I don't want that. So there are other companies, but I know we do need to make a better job at resolving those things. And the
Yeah,
unfortunate thing is, I feel like some stuff will only get resolved once let's say that old guard dies, that generation goes, and it gets a bit better. Then that generation goes. So it's not going to be an overnight thing, how some people want it to be.
yeah, and it's, yeah, and I agree with that. I do feel like, they just need to, those old guard just need to go.
Yeah,
Just
yeah, and you see that whether that's to do with equality or fairness, or just in terms of how they run the company, like the certain business decisions they make. You'll see like a CEO that was a co-founder that was there for 30, 40 years, they leave, and everyone like, oh, the company's gonna fail now. And then the company not only keeps, succeeding, it gets even better, profitable wise. They just get more lean, and I think that's obviously business, but also the treatment of the employees as well. And it's just something it's one of those things that I think you can talk about and even complain about, that okay, it's wrong, but the reality is some things take so much time that you need to either, again, I don't want to say it in a mean way for anyone listening, either suck it up or find that alternatively, like that other company where you're confident they won't treat you the same.
yeah, I think the only sort of comment I think I have on that is, and I've had first-hand experience of it, is sometimes that old guard just isn't going to go. is just not going to leave, and it's not, though, and it's so frustrating because you want things to change, and I don't, it's really difficult because your kind of options are I go or you go. When actually, if everybody was slightly more open minded, if there were forums for these kind of discussions to happen, where, and it's never in the finger pointing, you did this to me, unless it's really bloody bad, but it's never this finger pointing, this person did this to me, sometimes they're not even aware of how they're acting, right? We've all done it, right, with our group of friends. We've acted like a bit of an idiot and whatever, and someone's had to kind of pull us up and be like, hey, can you not do that? Can you not say that? Can you just chill out a little bit? And it's how we have those conversations at work, to people that are in quote unquote more senior positions, a part of that quote unquote old guard. So though I take your point that at some point things will change, it's not going to be an overnight thing. I do think there needs to be far more easier way to have those conversations, because shouldn't it be the best of outcomes where everybody gets to stay in a job? I've been in a job where I absolutely loved it, but the environment wasn't right. Like, it was that kind of old guard mentality. So what a crappy thing for everybody that I leave or whoever else leaves. And if there was this forum where people can kind of discuss it, whether that comes from HR or whatever, then that makes, it's a win-win for everybody. It shouldn't be this kind of like all or nothing mentality. There is a balance to these things where we all
No,
should.
there definitely is. But again, like the counter thing want to, just add to that before we, move on to another topic is the reality is for you're not going to get every company in every industry to change. Definitely not in a, within a few year or in a 1 or 2 decade time period. So it's more of a thing of you personally, the best thing that I'd say you can do, well, whether you're a junior or whether you're 40, 50 years old, is just look at yourself and say, what do I want? And can I get this from this company? Because if you ignore the aspect of, being fair, equality, all that side, if you're working at a company and you just see your career progression is not where you want it to go, and that's just the company's just not, gearing their employees up for that, you would naturally, or a lot of people would say, okay, I'm not going to work at this company anymore. I'm going to quit. I'm going to go and work at another company. And I think people need to have that option in their,
Yeah.
in their toolbox, because that option is available. So I know sometimes if you really want to work in a certain industry, let's say, I don't know, the typical, news industry, like CNBC, BBC, those sort of companies, you're gonna get a very old guard like experience. So it is almost like, okay, if you're going into that, you need to know what you're getting into. And yeah, there are sort of newer companies that are within the news space that you can go to. But yeah, it is, I think it's something that younger people and I think schools need to teach, is that, really analyze the decisions that you're making of the career that you're going to go into and maybe the industry you're going to go into, because you might not really want to be in that industry. Like, you might really love writing, but do you want to be in the writing industry? I mean, though, to make money, those are two, completely different things. It's like you might really love gaming, but do you really want to be a programmer? I'm saying that from the perspective of nothing to do with equality, but just from the sheer workload and the intense nature of the job. I think a lot of people don't want it. Like, I see it all the time. People that have a games programming degree, they'll go and get a web development, job because it pays more. It's, normal hours for the most part and less hassle. Yet they've done games programming. Yet they love games. And again, that has nothing to do with the equality side of it. Yes, I think you could make the argument that if the game industry was a bit more fair and equal, it would be better. But it's not to do with, female or male or black and white. It's just that, the gaming industry is like that. It's going to change, but it's going to take a while, but just make that, decision. Whereas I know people that will say, I really want to work in gaming. I'm willing to, get paid less. I'm willing to do, more hours, when, launch time is coming. But it's just something I have to take on if I want to be part of that industry.
Yeah. And I think some of that is just the realities, right? We all have really difficult days at work.
Yeah, there's
Um,
that as well.
yeah. And I think, but I think when you're, choosing a career, you don't know you don't know your ass from your elbow. You've got no idea because you
No.
don't work in it. And I think, you know, generally the communication between games industry and university students or school leavers or whatever about what it's actually like to work at a business is like zero. All you see on LinkedIn is, oh my gosh, I started day one and so have sent me this box and this mug and this thing and made me feel so at home. You're like, that's great, but what have they told you about the job? Like,
Yeah,
who
like
else?
that's not the real reality for most
Yeah.
people. Yeah,
And you know
you
what?
will get some companies that will, treat you nice, give you that mug, take you out for lunch, and
Then day two, it's all downhill. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's
yeah,
just
like, but a lot of time you'll just join and you'll not know what you're doing. You just kind of sit there, but you kind of need to do something because otherwise, it's like the higher ups are going to think, why have they hired you? But you don't really have anything to do, but you don't want to ask them for something to do because you want to feel like that they feel that they think you know what you're doing. It is a difficult one,
yeah.
when you're starting out, especially when you're on the younger, side of things. Even when you're older, it's not the easiest, but when you're younger and you don't really know, it can be difficult.
Yeah, and I and that's what I would say. I think a part of the interview process, I think I always try to ask, can I speak to people in your team? Um, because one, it kind of shows interest, and then second of all, you can really gauge what it's like to work in that team. I did it at AGM. Actually, I met loads of people at AGM across my interview process, despite the fact that it was really thick and fast. But it got me to know people, like, who are you, what do you work on, what do you like, what do you like, and people were really, really honest about some of the challenges and then some of the peaks and troughs and stuff. But I didn't, because I did that, I didn't, when I walked into my job on day one, I didn't feel like I was in for any nasty surprises. Like, one, I knew everybody anyway, right? Because I'd met them all through my interview process. So like the day one jitters were completely gone. Second of all, I knew what the role was. I could ask so many questions and had all these conversations and stuff. So, it wasn't like I was walking into that conversation completely green. And, even if you are a grad and, or whatever, this is your first job, ask that question. Can I speak to other people in your team? It'd be great to learn a bit more about the role and their experience of it and what they like and what they don't like. And actually, if they say yes, that's a really good sign. That's a super transparent business that we love to see it. And then you can assess the person's answers and how you feel about it. But if they don't, it's kind of almost like, why are you being so cagey? Like, I would like to know what it's like to work here. And it's a real power move, I think, to ask that kind of question. I feel like that's a very confident, I know what I want and I'm going to ask for it, please and thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely one of those things that you do need to be sometimes just be willing to put yourself, out there, you know,
Yeah.
ask those questions as well.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's my overall set of questions that are more specific to your, career. But I always end it with a few fun questions. So
Go
the
for
first
it.
one is: would you rather run a 10-person company or a 1,000-person company, and why?
Um, I would say a 10-person company. And my reason for saying that is I like to just be involved in stuff. I think if I am too far removed from a project or don't know what's going on, that would kind of freak me out. And I feel like when you're, running a company that is 1,000 people, you are a spreadsheet guy. You are living in spreadsheets. You are working out numbers,
Definitely.
money's coming in and coming out. And, you're not doing the job that you maybe had set out to do when you started that company or whatever. You, like, my partner runs a business and he's growing. He runs an architecture practice and he, started that business a couple of years ago and he's hiring more people and getting further and further away from what he wants to do every day. And I see that and go, oh God, that's not what I want at all. And I feel, the sort of person that I am is I want to be problem solving on the day to day. Like, I get my kick from solving a problem or coming up with some cool creative angle to something. And I feel like the further I get away from that, the unhappier I am. So 10-person company all day long.
10-person. Okay. And would you rather have £5 million up front or half a million a year for the rest of your life, and why?
I'd go 500,000 for the rest of the year, like for 500,000 a year for the rest of my life.
Okay, like
5 million.
what's the reasoning?
So 5 million quid, like just the numbers first of all don't stack. I'd rather have 500,000 because I think I've got another 34 years to go. So that's all good for me. Like I'll make my money in the end for some generational wealth reasons. Um, and then second of all, like I feel like
But you can't
it.
pass it down. I think you can't
Oh,
pass down the ability to earn the half a million a year.
okay, but can I like say if I die? I'm going to ask a lot of questions now. If I die without any children, can I donate my amassed wealth to charity?
You can do whatever
Oh,
money you've made with the, whether it's the 5 million and you've invested it or the half a million you've saved it. You can do whatever you want to, as you normally would. It's just that you can't. It's not like a house that if that generates money, if you got a rental house, you can't pass it down to your kids. So it's
okay, that's
literally
fine.
just the money. That's what I mean.
Okay, so I think I would take the 500,000 for a year, and I think like I'm not a massively materialistic person, um, but I think 500,000, like I can live quite a nice life on the money that I'm currently on. Like like I just had a holiday and I have a PlayStation 5 and I have a car. Like I'm all good, so I
Mm.
feel pretty happy with that. So I feel like 500,000, you get to do the extra fancy things that you want, and on my bucket list is like fly Emirates first class one day. So I could do that in a heartbeat. Done. Buy a nice house. You can make business investments. I can still work and invest that money and do whatever I want with it. Yeah, like I feel like if you get 5 million quid up front, you will just you'll wreck that immediately. Like 5 million quid in this economy with this rate of inflation won't go that far. Like you'll sink into that pretty quickly. But 500,000 quid every year for the rest of your life, that's money you can build up and invest and do certain things with. Yeah, so the smart money says 500,000 for the rest of my life.
Okay. And what about your favorite board game, video game, and movie?
Board game. I'm gonna say Monopoly, and this kind of stacks with my previous answer. is I I love the fact Monopoly is really long and it takes forever when you've got
No
loads
one
of.
ever finishes it. I mean, I'm that guy that always wants to finish it, and every time I ever start with someone, somebody either gets bored or they just get annoyed and they just want to go. And like
I
they
kind
always
of
say, we'll start it again in a couple hours after we've eaten and we're taking a break, and it stays
yeah.
there on the table for 3 days. And I'm like, really want to play it.
See, I love that because that kind of puts that like mentality in me. Like I don't have to win it; I just have to outlast you. Like that's the mentality, and I love that. And then also, like when I play with my other half and a couple of friends, my other half is really bad with money in real life and really bad with money in Monopoly. And I can see on his face exactly what he's doing. So it is my great pleasure when we play Monopoly that I bankrupt him first, and I do it on purpose. So I find that yeah, Monopoly is really fun. And also, I've played. My sister's introduced me to Monopoly Deal. Which was just an hour of us screaming at each other and doing like negotiations and all this kind of stuff. It was
I
so much
haven't
fun.
played that one, but I do want to because when I play regular Monopoly, I always start doing deals. I'm always like, I'll give you this for this, and I'm like, it's only worth, I really get into people's face, and I'll be like, don't do the deal with them. I'll give you this. We can partner. Like there was this one time, I was about to just go bankrupt. Like usually I always win Monopoly, but this one time I was about to lose, and then I just turned to my wife and I was like, let's partner up. Instead of all of this stuff going
Yeah,
away to the bank or to them, I'll give you all of it. We partner up. Because I had a lot of property and a lot of stuff I just had landed on a bunch of things that just really depleted me. So I had a fair bit of assets in the game. I was like, let's partner up. You've got a fair bit of cash reserves, but you don't have that much property, and you definitely don't have any hotels. We partnered up. We just annihilated it.
yeah,
In reality, most people would just say no just to destroy you. But like, I just love doing that too. Partner up, sway people, and just get what you can out of them in the game. It's just so fun.
yeah. Monopoly Deal's really thick and fast. So that it is Monopoly. I think is my favorite. And then I think favorite game. I'm going to give you a top three because I feel like I've spoken about Final Fantasy VII a lot. So Final Fantasy VII without a doubt. I really, really love BioShock Infinite because it absolutely
That's a good one,
devastated
yes.
me. And it was a game that, like, I played BioShock the first one. I hadn't played the second one. And Infinite obviously is like a brand new story and stuff. So it wasn't really, and the trailer wasn't, the most illuminating thing. And I think it had changed. A lot of people would say like it changed a lot, and that there was a lot of stories about how it was kind of had a bit of a rough development process. So nobody really knew what it was when it came out. And I remember finishing that game, and I was at home on my own, and I just, and this is the sign for me when something is really good, is I finished it and I just didn't know what to do with myself. I didn't know who I was going to talk to about it. I wanted to call somebody. My other half wasn't home, and I was just like, what just happened? What just? And it took me about 3 or 4 days to kind of emotionally get over what happened to me. And I just, yeah, it's one of those games that I will go back to. Like once a year, I'll do a playthrough, and I still have the same reaction to it every single time. It's
Yeah, I
just
mean,
one of
I really do want to play the Bioshock games, again, especially number one with the ending with Andrew Ryan.
oh
Like,
god, yeah.
would you kindly, like that revelation? I remember when they revealed that at the end. I remember like every moment that he said, "Would you kindly?" I was just thinking, I was like, he literally did say that every time he was asking me to do
Honestly, that
something.
feeling of like you manipulated me, you son of a bitch. And then also there's an episode of Black Mirror. I can't remember the name of it, but he's wearing a headset and he has to play a game in it. And the woman asked him, "Would you kindly?" And it immediately got my back up, and I was like, "Nope, I'm out. Nope, too scared. Not playing this. I'm good." I kind of just refused to watch the rest of it. So yeah, Bioshock Infinite's a really, really good one. It's definitely up there as one of my favourites. And then I think my third and final one is Hotline Miami.
Okay.
I love Hotline Miami. It has, first of all, one of the best soundtracks for a game. It's all really like heavy hitting electro kind of stuff. I think also like films like John Wick have based a lot of their action and stuff on, and the style of it on Hotline Miami. So there's two of them. Um, and then also, I just think it's one of that, because of the gameplay is quite simple. It's kind of one of those ones that you play and then are infuriated by because you die so many times, but you just keep going. And it's just endlessly fun. It's definitely like you can just, it's not like a big story like a Final Fantasy VII where you kind of have to like adjust yourself and calibrate when you kind of sit down to play it. But with Hotline Miami, you can just pick it up and go bash some skulls, and you're all good with some really cool electro.
Fair enough. And like, what video? I mean, also favorite movie as well.
Favorite movie? Oh god. Okay. Um. Okay, I can't because I can't. I'm like a nightmare for this kind of stuff because I always have to give you like a couple of versions because I can't just kind of pick one because it really stresses me out. Um, Favorite movie. So one of them is a movie called The Virgin Suicides, directed by Sophia Coppola, based on a book. Um, and that movie came to me when I was like 16, 17, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. No movie that I've ever seen or book really encapsulates the feeling of being a teenage girl more than that movie. And the soundtrack is done by Air, and it's one of the greatest movie soundtracks of all time. There's just something about that movie that just hits me right in the guts. I'm going to choose Fight Club because
Good movie.
I love Fight Club, and I think Fight Club still is a massive joke to me because it is a film that is obsessed with masculinity that a lot of a specific type of guy will really love, but it's a joke about masculinity and just how ridiculous it is and how easily bendable and breakable it is. And it just, yeah, it still makes me laugh. And then I think I'll choose Goodfellas as well because I love Goodfellas. I constantly quote it to my other half, and I had to ask him. We were getting some work done in our house a couple of weeks ago, and I needed him to take some cash out to pay the builder. And there's a part of it. She goes, "Oh, I'm going to go shopping," and he says to her, "Oh, how much money do you need?" And she gestures this much, and she like gestures to like a big fat wad of cash, and I do that to him constantly, and it makes him laugh. So yeah, I think those are my three favourite. I feel like they're cool enough
Yeah, yeah, I
for
mean, for
favourite
sure.
movies.
And they're definitely movies that are, well known, popular, and especially, the last two. So, what video game are you looking forward to the most?
Um, well, shockingly, Final Fantasy 16. I'm going to be really honest. I was really on the fence about that game. Like, it's a mature title. There's blood in it, swearing. Like, it's not your sort of typical Final Fantasy game. I really just, I hadn't pre-ordered it or kind of interacted with it much. I played the demo on Monday and it blew me away. Genuinely, really, really impressed with it. It was kind of that experience where you sit down to play a demo and I just didn't want it to end. I don't think I've ever clicked pre-order onto a title as fast as I did. So yeah, that's one that I'm really looking forward to. Spider-Man 2. I know it's one of those like, everybody's looking forward to it answers, but I just love those games so much.
Yeah,
And
I
the fact,
mean they're really. I mean, Insomniac always do good games.
yeah,
They're
they
really
just
well
deliver
made.
every single time. And I remember because I remember when they released the one of the first Spider-Man games on Xbox years and years ago, and it was the web swinging on it. It was hilarious. But this, on to me, just feels like this is what it would be like to be Spider-Man, and the
Yeah,
fact that
it's also AAA. Like the thing with the Spider-Man games are the new ones is they're actually made to the level of a Call of Duty or a GT, like that triple A level. And you can tell they haven't just put a movie out a game out because there's a movie or because
no,
Spider-Man's popular.
yeah, it's a great narrative. Like even when the Spider-Man 1 came out and they had those DLC episodes and stuff with Silver Sable and Black Cat and stuff, just really good storytelling. And that's what I love about these games. Like I grew up with Spider-Man. My dad's a big comic book nerd, so we kind of grew up with all that kind of stuff in the house growing up. But playing Spider-Man 2 is genuinely, like, I'm genuinely excited about it. And I think the fact that they have people like Craven the Hunter, one of my favorite characters in comic books of all time. I just think he's fabulous. Like as outfits go, like I'm all about the Craven the Hunter look. I just think it's great. Um, but yeah, I'm really excited about that game. And then Hades 2 as well. Whenever they decide to release that, I shall be patiently waiting because I think that looks amazing.
Yeah, I know a lot of people are, looking forward to that. So my final question is, it's a two-parter. Does money buy you happiness, and what does a good life mean to you?
Wow, that's a really good question. Kind of wasn't That's very deep as well. I wasn't really expecting it. Um, I would say money doesn't buy you happiness. As someone who was, I lived in a bed sit for a really long time, and I was on a single salary while my partner was going through 7 years of studying for being an architect. Like some of the best times I've had in my life were just us being skin and silly at home. And I also think that money solves a short term problem, but it doesn't solve long term ones. And I think, it's though I can there's definitely a lot going on in this country with the cost of living crisis. Like I feel like we're going through it, and I think you can still have happy times regardless of what kind of the side of the fence you're on. What does a what was a good life look like?
Yeah, what does a good life mean to you ultimately?
A good life. I think it's just a life lived. Like, I used to, believe it or not, I used to be a very, very shy person that wouldn't do certain things or wouldn't just, wouldn't experience stuff or wouldn't put myself out and whatever. But I think it's to live life with no regrets. So whether that's in your career or in your personal life or romantic life or whatever, I think if you can look back and say, no, like, I own that decision or I did that thing and feel at peace with it, I think that's really important. I think especially like, I've got a birthday, not a big birthday, but a birthday coming up in a couple of months. And, you gotta get into that very, like, I get birthday blues, like every time I have a birthday. So I get into that place where I start looking back and like, what have I achieved? Am I a thing yet? Am I doing the thing? Um, and I think, more so for this year than other, I can look back and say, I own those decisions. It was difficult, but I did something I was proud of, and I'm proud of myself of where I stand now and who I am and what I've achieved, and still got tons to do. And that fills me with a lot of happiness. Like I look around and, my partner and my house and my pets and my job that I love and the people that I like to work with and my good group of friends, and it's feeling satisfied. Um, I feel like I don't know if you're familiar with the Last Airbender.
I mean, I know a little bit about it.
Oh,
My
so
wife really
anyone
loves
that's
it.
listening, I feel like I went very Uncle Iroh for anybody that gets that reference. But yeah, um, it's just to look back and have no regrets and feel satisfied.
Okay, I mean, I think good life advice in general for yourself and for others, because it's very easy to, look back, think, I should have done that, or I shouldn't have done that. Try and make conscious decisions, but then, equally, don't try and get too weighed down by making the right decision, because you're not always gonna make the right decision, and
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes the not so efficient decision ends up working out well for you. And if you're the sort of type of person that just looks at things, sees the way things are, and makes the best of the situation, you could make the best of a bad situation. It does happen. So, like, that's my advice for using that for achieving a good life.
yeah. And the best advice that was ever given to me, um, and it sounds really basic, but I think about it all the time, is you only can do what you can do. That's it. You make the decision with the information that you have at the time, and you go with what you think is right, and like that's all that matters. So whether something feels like a catastrophe at the time, and it did, when I left IGN and wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life, I ended up in a good place. So though I look back on it and go, yeah, okay, it was a little bit bumpy, but I feel good now, and that's kind of all that matters. Um, so yeah, I think you can only do what you can do.
Yeah, 100%. And obviously, try not to dwell on things, too much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So that's the, end of the podcast, everyone. I want to thank Jasmin for taking the time to come onto the podcast today. Is there anything that you want to say to, everyone listening? Any, comments before we wrap up?
Yeah, no, just thank you so much for having me. Like, this has been the first time I've ever done a podcast, and it's been a blast.
I
I've
mean,
really,
you've
really
done really
enjoyed it.
well. It doesn't feel like this is your first time.
Yeah, no, it's that shy, retiring personality that I've got.
Yeah.
Um, I think we've covered a lot today, and it's been a really cathartic experience for me. And I feel like if there's anybody that is listening to this, or is thinking about going into gaming, or needs any advice, or even just wants to get involved with women in gaming, please do reach out to me on LinkedIn. Like, I'm always really happy to hear from people. And if you're interested in the work that we do at AGM, again, reach out. Like, obviously just don't stop talking. So yeah, just hit me up. More than happy to have a chat with anybody.
Yeah, that sounds good. I'll get all the links, including LinkedIn, anything else that Jasmine wants to share, after the podcast, and I'll put that in the description for anyone that's listening that does want to take up, Jasmine's offer of reaching out, seeing what it's like, to work in the games industry, especially if you're a woman. So, feel free to check those links out. Appreciate everyone for listening, and I'll see you in the next week episode of FireDEV. Bye bye.